My name is Douglas Bagley. I was born in East Mill Creek, Utah, and man, did I have a great childhood. I was born of the goodliest parents ever. I can't imagine a better place to be alive, a better time to be alive, a better family to be born into, and I've had more blessings than anyone I know. That's why I call myself the most blessed man on the face of the earth. I've got this organized in different time periods. So this is back in the 1950s, out in East Mill Creek, which was pretty far out in the county. I had three friends growing up. The three friends were Ted Thompson, Howard Benyon, and myself. Here we were. I guess I'm my own friend. Anyway, great people to be with, have pals when you're pal around and so forth. In the summers, there was no air conditioning. So by 10 or 11 o'clock, it got stinko hot inside houses. So we'd go outside and we'd find a place to have a picnic. And we'd go get our sandwiches or our apples or whatever we could bring, our treasures, to the picnic. And it was always a great surprise that Howard Benyon would have homemade bread with ketchup on it. And he would call it a ketchup sandwich. Now, Howard later was a pretty good cook. But back in the beginning of our youth and our existence, it was speed, quick, whatever we could put together. I was a honey or a jam kind of a guy. Peanut butter came later on bread, but that's kind of what we did. And then we go to a place on O.C. Tanner's property and sit there and watch the water skeeters in the shade. There was one of the old ditches that would cut through his property, and water skeeters would skate on top of the water, and we'd catch them, count them, or talk about what we were going to do with our lives and teach each other different aspects of growing up and talk about what kind of families we were going to have, what we were going to do when we got old. So that was a great time in my life. One of the grand adventures we had growing up was laying on the lawn and watching the cars go by. And there were always occasions where workmen would stop and be in the middle of the road. Now, this was the day and the age when the cowboys were brand new to us, and all the cowboys seemed to be smoking. So we thought, as we wanted to be grown up, and at age 7, we could do the same kind of things. And one of the workers flipped his cigarette over on the grass. So we just kind of crawled over there casually and picked up a cigarette, and I puffed on it. Oh, that was the worst tasting, nastiest thing ever. That was just like, I can't even describe how bad it was. And then I felt immediate remorse. I thought, oh man, my mother is going to catch me. So I went back with the kids, with Howard and Ted, and decided I've got to get the smell off me, the cigarette smell. Can you smell it? So I'd blow my breath into their face. Oh yeah, it's still there, it's bad. So I went in and took a bath. Imagine a 7-year-old boy taking a bath in the middle of the day without his parents asking him to be bathed. Brushed my teeth, came out, talked to Howard and Ted. Now what do I do? Can you smell it? So there I was. Yeah, we can still smell it. Oh no, my parents are going to kill me. So I said, what do you do? How do you get this smell out of your breath? And Ted Thompson said, I think if you eat cherries, a lot of cherries, that'd do it. So down to Ted's house we went and climbed his cherry tree. And certainly I must have eaten, I'll bet you, I wasn't counting, but I'll bet you 5,000 or 6,000 cherries until I couldn't handle any more cherries. Went home and nobody said anything. And my mother said, "Why did you take a bath today?" "Oh, just kind of seemed like a good idea." But I never told my mom or dad about that till much later. It was kind of fun. So that was my worst foray until I could get baptized in the Salt Lake Tabernacle, and that was a much better experience. And then all my sins, including my cigarette smoking, were washed away. Oh, that was great. We would play hide and go seek in the evenings from about when I was about age 7 on up to, probably in high school. We had the greatest spot on the whole planet because it was across the street at O.C. Tanner's house. He had a large yard with trees all around, and it was a great place to run and hide. And if you were sort of quick, you could kind of hide and run, and we'd play hide and go seek. There weren't many things you could do back in those days, so we'd call up all the neighborhood gang and go out there and play. So the boys and the girls would play together, and we'd just have a great time. But I remember hide and go seek as a youth. That was just the best thing ever. Salt Lake County was growing so quickly, they had to keep building schools. The average attendance in each class, or size, pupil size, was 40 plus. Anyway, they built Evergreen Junior High School. So down to Evergreen Junior High School I went from my elementary school, East Mill Creek Elementary, and there was only one other boy in my age group down there. All the other kids went to Olympus Junior High. Well, that didn't make for a lot of friends if you don't know anybody. So here I was, small, diminutive in size. I was the smallest kid in the 7th grade that I could see. I couldn't see too many kids because I was so short. But anyway, there I was at Evergreen Junior High. I played the clarinet. One day, the band teacher, who also played in the Utah Symphony, said, "Can any clarinet player," and there must have been about 30 clarinet players, "play one octave above where the notes are written?" So everybody tried it, and I gave it a shot, and I was the best one. So I was immediately the first chair clarinet. I thought that was pretty cool. And I never practiced. Okay, once in a while, a little bit, but not much. But anyway, I was there in the 7th and 8th grade. I was the first chair clarinet. So all my friends played other instruments, but it was kind of fun. Now, by the 8th grade, I had to learn, because of my size, to have just a little bit of humor. So they all thought I was kind of a funny guy. And I got elected to be an 8th grade class president. Go figure, in 1958. That was kind of a big honor, but I didn't do anything. But it was kind of fun. My dad bought a horse, and it bucked off my sister. So I was the next one down. My oldest sister, Barbara, played the piano all the time, and she didn't much care for horses anyway. So after Kathy got bucked off, I was the one that fed the horse and took care of it. I didn't have hay fever at the time. I didn't get that till I was about 16 years of age. But I would go horseback riding with my friend Howard Benyon, who also had a horse. Now, Howard was a pretty buff guy. He had a good muscular build, and I was just built different. It wasn't that I wasn't muscular, I was just built different. So one time, Howard couldn't go horseback riding, and I was out exercising my horse, and I went up to Mount Olympus. That's when I had my first spiritual experience. I was galloping the horse down on a dirt road, and a deep voice came up to my ears and said during my gallop, "Slow down, Doug." So I stopped, and it was like somebody you'd hear on the movies with a deep voice. If you know about the Ten Commandments, it might be the voice of God when he was touching the finger or showing the tablets to Moses. A nice, deep bass voice. Anyway, I went back, turned my horse around and went back up and couldn't see anybody there, but it was a man's voice. This was about 10 o'clock in the morning. I could hear the construction sounds. This was during the summer in the Salt Lake Valley, all over the valley, because the noise would rise. Couldn't see or hear anybody. I walked the horse down the mountain there. There was a very sharp turn, and I speculated there may have been an animal, a snake or something in the road, or maybe it was just a cautionary voice from a guardian angel talking to me. But I was always appreciative, and that was when I first sensed that there were guardian angels looking out for me, for which I was very grateful. I got my first job when I was 12, and it was with my dad's company, Vacudent. My dad and Dr. Albert Thompson, that's my friend Ted Thompson's dad, worked together on a project to suck saliva out of your mouth when you went to the dentist. So Albert was the dentist, and he would go around and lecture other dentists and talk about this. And then my dad was the manufacturing part. Then my dad went ahead and got involved with medical and all kinds of research things at the University of Utah with a group of doctors. But he was a pretty creative and inventive guy. But my first job at age 12 was with Lowell Durham. Lowell Durham and Jim Wright and myself would go down to work, and my dad just kind of maybe made up work for us to do. We would make what we called a hydroceptor tube, a little plastic tube, black rubber tube. We would drill holes in it, knock the little rubber pieces out of the middle of the hose, and then my dad would sell them. So we'd go down and work a couple of hours and get some money. But this is how I started working. I made a big whopping salary of 75 cents an hour, which was generous. Later on, I got a job being a janitor in high school, and then I made $1.25 an hour. No, $1.50, sorry. But I had to work 3 hours cleaning a building, and I'd wash the windows, I'd clean the toilets, vacuum, I'd do empty the garbage, I'd do those kind of things, and they shouldn't have hired me, but they did. Now, $4.50 back then would pay for me taking a girl to the movies and buy us popcorn and a drink and candy. So it was a pretty generous salary. But that's what I did all through high school, every Saturday, as well as working for Vacudent in the summer. One time in the summer in 1962, because I was born in August, I couldn't get my driver's license until August, and that was the last one in my class. So Virginia Hinckley asked her dad if he'd give me a ride to work. So for about a month, I rode with Elder Gordon B. Hinckley to work. Now, it's an interesting thing when you're a sophomore in high school. You're not quite sure about what's going on in the world, and I didn't really have any affection towards Virginia Hinckley at the time. Although we were friends, I wasn't attracted to her in that way. But at any rate, we would ride. He'd come by and honk, and I'd run out to the street in the morning, and he would always have classical music on going to work. I would get a ride home with my father, but riding to work for about a month, that was about all he could handle me, and then he got other duties, and he was transferred as an apostle to the Far East to do Far East apostle-type duties. So that was a very short-lived experience, but I always remembered that. And President Hinckley was very kind. He went to school with my father in high school, so they were friends. Also, at the time prior to him being an apostle or an assistant to the apostle, as he was called back then, in 1958 or 59, he was the stake president up in the East Mill Creek stake. And my dad was the bishop that built the chapel up by Wasatch Junior High School. That's a stake center, and a very large stake center. So he would call up to our house regularly, being the stake president, wanting to talk to my dad, and I would talk to him. "Hi, Doug, is your dad there?" "No, sir." But, he was just another guy. He wasn't anything big and famous and wonderful and full of the Lord's pick on being a special person here, a special witness on the earth, to me back then. Friday nights were fun nights growing up. In the summer or during the week, as a group of boys, we would hang out together with our friends, and one of the activities was to drive up East Mill Creek Canyon, or Mill Creek Canyon, and find some cars parked. I suppose the couples were smooching or doing whatever couples do, talking most likely. And then we would line up a group of 5 or 6 boys with our fastest running shoes, and we would run, jump up on the trunk, run on the top of the car, get on the hood, and then jump off in a line. So it was very quick, as fast as 6 boys could do that, and boy, we were scared. We were running for our lives. And we'd go up and down the canyon doing that, and then we'd go hide. And cars would come down the canyon trying to look for us. We didn't know if they'd shoot us or beat us up or what, but that was a lot of fun back then. And man, those nights were dark in that canyon. Whew, it was dark. So that was kind of a fun little silly experience. My father bought a boat, an interest in a boat. He never seemed to want to buy his own boat. He always wanted to seem to buy an interest because it didn't seem practical to him. So he'd get one of his close friends and buy a boat. The first boat we got was with Roland Bain, our next-door neighbor. Now, Roland Bain and my dad were missionary companions. So see, after your mission, you can be friends with people you meet on your mission. Anyway, well, they went up to Bear Lake, and we would go up to Bear Lake for every holiday. This was before Bear Lake got real popular. The 4th of July, the 24th of July, it was a little too cold on Memorial Day, but Labor Day for sure in September, that was the last trip. But all the time we'd go up there and have a grand time staying, and we'd stay at a place called Blue Water Beach. Then at nights, when we were just a little bit older, in high school, we'd go over to Ideal Beach. Ideal Beach was up on the Idaho side. And it was an old place and with a large round dance floor. And we'd go in there, and as a group of young people, we'd dance and party around, and then we'd leave. Our parents were making sure we would get home before people would be starting to drink and get on the highways, because that was a pretty dangerous time. Funny how it still is. But at any rate, that's what we did for activities in the summer. And water skiing was a great activity on Bear Lake. I remember one time in a boat, we went running out, or not running out, but it was a rowboat. And Ron Thompson was 4 years older than I was. And he was rowing, and we got kind of close to the shore, and he said, "You guys want to swim over to the shore?" Sure. We were young and 13. What do we know? So in we dove, and we swam, and the water was so cold. It just sucked your energy right out of you. Ted Thompson and I. And got over to the shore, and I could not go 1 inch further. So I said, maybe this is it. I guess I'm done for. So I tried to stand up, and lo and behold, Bear Lake goes very gradually into the water. And the slope inside the lake, you can walk out for a long way before you sink over your head. Fortunately, we made it to the shore, and I was very grateful. I was very grateful for that. Ron did teach us how to catch fish. We would catch fish by starting out, as you know, streams empty into lakes mostly. Sometimes they ran out of lakes, but the little streams we would go to would empty into the lake, and we would start at the lake, and with our fingers, wiggling our fingers, go up very slowly, walk along, going up away from the lake, right alongside the bank of the ditch, and inevitably we'd come across a fish and just flip them up over the side. That was always a lot of fun. Unfortunately, these were carp. These were not great eating fish. Carp back then was a junk fish. We were always afraid we'd get baldness or something if we ate a carp. My sister, in 1958, contracted Hodgkin's disease. Now, that was a form of cancer. And being in the 8th grade, you didn't know about those things. You didn't know where it would strike in your body and so forth. So as you would grow older, you'd learn about those things. But Hodgkin's was a very serious thing. And I remember the night at our dinner table when we discussed it, and it was a very tearful, sad, sad night. But our parents said our sister did not want people to know about it, so we were not to talk about it. So we didn't. But I remember going across the street, straight across the street. There were some tall trees there, and that was my sacred grove. And I remember pouring out my heart to the Lord to bless my sister, asking for her life to be continued. And what could I do? Asking for knowledge, what could I do? At that time, I prayed till I got cold, basically. But it was the fall, so back into the house I went, I didn't receive a grand vision like Joseph Smith, but I did certainly know that I had connected and talked with the Lord, and that was my first deep, deep prayer, praying with all my heart to the Lord. My next experience happened in 1961. My father, Louis Bagley, went on a stake project to get some timber for a corral and some fencing out at the stake farm. The timber was given to us, to the stake. So all the members of the stake, the men, and the Aaronic priesthood brethren were asked to go out there and get these boards and any kind of timber from this donated site. It was on about June 20th, and it was hot as the dickens. This was before we knew about hydration. And nowadays, everybody has a water bottle everywhere they go. But back then, you just kind of worked, and when you got thirsty, you just pushed through it, although it wasn't the healthiest thing, obviously. Well, my dad started out there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and when he finished, let me go back. I arrived at about 4 in the afternoon and worked until about 7:30, and I was just parched. I could not do anything. I was complaining and murmuring to beat the band. I said, hey, I'm going to get a ride home with someone else. And he said, okay, go right. I'll come back later. Well, later on, I got a phone call when I got home, that he'd been taken to the hospital. He had a heat stroke, and his temperature spiked up to 107. So you could see he was really dehydrated. Well, that is not good at all for your brain, and he was never the same after that. They got him hydrated, gave him IVs in his arms, but he was not into it mentally, and physically he declined for about a year and a half. There was a time when I was thinking about dropping out of high school to take care of him, because we couldn't find anybody who wanted to take care of a guy who had diminished mental capacity. LDS Hospital would not take people long term, even though he had excellent insurance. So there we were, stuck in a hard place. We got a retired nurse to come in and tend him, but I can remember he would wander away, and it was a tough time. It was not a time I would ever envy people going through. I'd have to get his clothes off to get him in the bathtub at night, and it would take me sometimes over an hour to get him undressed. He didn't want to get undressed. It was like he reverted back to a little boy, and here I was, his son, and here my dad was just called to be a mission president. He had his own business, a leader in the community, a powerful speaker. People loved him in the ward, a great bishop, but here he was acting like the mental capacity of a three-year-old, and it was a very difficult time. I joined the Army in high school, January 2nd, 1963. A group of about 30 of us joined the Army, and we didn't want to go over and get shot in Vietnam, because Vietnam was a nasty place, and we didn't think walking through fields of rice and other jungle areas sounded very fun. So we decided to be medics, all of us together, and we joined the 328th General Hospital Unit. Later, one of the doctors there was the president of the University of Utah, but he was very kind to us, a good man. Anyway, off into the Army we went. We went to summer camp, and here I was, 17, learning how to kill people with bayonets, learning how to do hand-to-hand combat, all those kind of things, throw a hand grenade, shoot, rifles. And Army was an interesting thing. I joined on an 8-year Army Reserve unit, which meant if our unit got called up, we could theoretically go over to Vietnam. But thank goodness it wasn't. And at that time, we were able to stay home and not have to go to Vietnam, but we had to go to weekend Army meetings. Now, I kind of had a reputation of passing out. It wasn't the sight of blood that got me. I remember one video we were watching, and this was before the Heimlich maneuver. They used to have to do tracheotomies in your throat. If you got a piece of meat or a food lodged in your throat, you'd have to poke a hole in someone's air pipe in their tracheotomy right here. And they showed 3 methods. One was with a knife, a dinner knife. Well, okay, that was interesting. Another was with a pencil or a pen. Well, that was interesting. And another was with your finger. Okay, that got me. I couldn't do that. All of a sudden, the blood drained out of me, and I thought, I'm not sticking my finger in anybody's neck. So over I went. They stopped the film. And I had 2 other occasions. One time I was at the LDS hospital. We were assisting doctors. We were orderlies or nurses' aides, doing those kind of things. A fellow had just had brain surgery. He'd had a hole put in his head, and the doctor had packed a whole bunch of gauze into his head. You've seen a round roll of gauze where you wrap your hand with a cut. Well, this gauze had been stuck in the guy's head. So I was there to assist the doctor. Dr. Schricker. I will never forget that name. So I was standing there. The patient was looking at me. He was quite conscious. He was staring at me. Well, I was watching this gauze come out of this guy's head. Okay, that was unusual. Well, after about 5 feet came out, okay, this isn't good. Then another 5 feet came out. Oh, I was getting pretty pale. Blood was leaving my face. So the doctor kept pulling. I don't know how much gauze he had in there. Probably had 70 yards. Anyway, I started walking down the hallway, and somebody was walking down the other way. I was just trying to get anywhere I could sit down and put my head between my knees. And there I was, face first, right on the tile floor. Boy, did I pass out cold. I broke my nose at that time. I didn't know it till later. It hurt. I bent my nose. I didn't know how bad it was. But anyway, that was the second time. I won't tell you about the third time, but they were equally as gruesome. So, being an Army medic was interesting because for 2.5 years, I had to go to active duty meetings. One time, because they knew I was kind of a funny guy, the doctors asked me to be an MC. And they brought in a go-go girl who was a lady in a two-piece bathing suit to dance, to entertain the troops. I'd been on my mission. I wasn't going to listen to that kind of stuff. And they said, Bagley, you need to MC this. Okay. So I went and talked to the lady, and of course she had her clothes on and all wrapped up. And I said, now, tell me a little bit about yourself. Are you a student? Yes, I'm a student. Are you a mother? Yes, I have 2 children. And are you divorced? Yes, I'm divorced. Okay, and you're earning money? Good. Okay, that's all I need to know. So I got up and I announced that this mother who had 2 children at home and going to school to try and earn a few bucks on the side was dancing, so please give her respect. And then I left. And I didn't stay. I don't know what she did. I don't know how she wiggled. But at least that was my foray in the Army. Great experiences. My first meeting of Margaret happened when a friend of mine, Richard Weber, said, hey, Doug, let's date. I guess he thought I was a nice guy or a cool guy or whatever. So I said, sure. I'll get a date. He says, I've got a gal I want to date. I'm going to marry this girl. Okay. So off to her house we went. His date was Margaret. Now she was in the front seat of the car. And for some reason, Richard said, I want to drive your car. Okay, drive my car. I don't care. So I was in the back seat, and we went to a fireside at, coincidentally, my parents' home, now where Natalie Hicks lives, out in East Mill Creek. So we went there. Leon Peterson was a speaker, a fireside speaker. And there were about 20 or 30 young people there, maybe 10 couples or 15 couples, something like that. So we were spread out in the backyard listening to him speak about religious topics and church items. I couldn't take my eyes off Margaret. I thought, man, this is one beautiful girl. Now, it's always an interesting challenge to speak to somebody when they aren't your date. So I'd speak to my date, and then I'd say, well, now, Margaret, tell me about this. But you couldn't do it too far or too much, or Richard would have been upset. So for the next year, I would ask Richard, now, are you still dating Margaret? Oh, yeah, I'm going to marry that girl. Don't you date her, Doug. Don't date her. Okay. Well, having the code of honor and never cutting the grass or dating another friend's girlfriend, I was a chivalrous, white knight of pristine honor. So I never did. Anyway, when I bumped into her years later, I remembered her well, and she was a marvelous girl. She's been a marvelous lady to me, and I'm grateful for that first experience of being attracted to her, not only because of the outside, but because she was a solid, friendly, kind person. So that's my first Margaret meeting. Steve Iba is a very close friend of mine, a grade ahead of me. Back in high school, Steve Iba was the president of the seminary and went on to become an institute teacher, a seminary teacher, and a regional church educational system person. I think they had 4 directors for different places in the world, and he was one. But back when I was a sophomore in high school, I had a sister who had cancer, remember? This would have been 1960, and I found out about Barbara's cancer in 1958. My dad had had his problems, and I decided, I'm ahead of myself. My dad had not had his problems. That was summer of 61. But in the fall and winter, I decided, and I had a very tough course. I had 5 classes that were tough in high school. But I decided I was going to, on my own, read the Book of Mormon. So I decided to do it in 10-page segments every night, the last thing I did before I went to bed. And this was Sunday night through Thursday night. Friday night was off. That was my night to do whatever with my friends. And Saturday night, dating and so forth. But Sunday night, that started the round again. So 5 days a week, I would read the Book of Mormon before I would go to bed. 10 pages every night. And I have to tell you, my mind was more focused. I received a testimony of the Book of Mormon because I was only 1 year removed from the time Joseph Smith had his first experience with the Father and the Son in the Sacred Grove. This was a powerful time for me to read the Book of Mormon, but I got the best grades I ever got in my hardest classes. None of the other students ever solved the problems in math. I could always get them. I was acing all the history tests. For some reason, my mind was focused on what it could do to learn. And I always was grateful for that testimony. And I always encouraged my friends after that time, read the Book of Mormon for yourself. Don't let anybody else. Don't wait till you're on a mission or 90 years old. Read it early on. But I've always had a testimony of the Book of Mormon. That was a great experience for me. Steve Iba was the only other guy I knew in high school who read the Book of Mormon. But that was a powerful time. I believe on myself to be the most blessed man in the world. The most blessed man that you'll ever meet in the world. I've had 2 wonderful women who pampered me way beyond what I ever deserved. The first bore me 3 children, and the second brought 6 children to the marriage. Then we had a child. When I'm talking to strangers, they ask me how many children I have, or I may volunteer it. And I say, we've got 10 children, 32 grandchildren. And here's where I tear up. I would say you'd want to be a neighbor to any one of them. They're the finest people you will ever meet. They're hardworking. They care about doing the right when there's choices are placed before them. this is why I'm telling you I'm the most blessed guy in the world. Oh, sure, everybody has financial miscues. We make mistakes. We make this choice and buy this piece of equipment or go into this business venture or lose money here or lose money there. But somehow the Lord has always provided, and all 10 children got married in the temple. That's a great blessing to me. It may not be to you, but it certainly is to me that they all got married and sealed to their companions. And that's about as far as I could take them. I told them all, now it's all up to you to go further. But I've always been grateful for that blessing of Margaret and those children coming into my life. I love each one of them as dearly as I love anybody. I've got some life lessons that I'd like to share with you. The first one is, one of the things I've learned, you can do most anything you want to in life. Most things we do over and over and over. I work in a moving and storage company, A1 Pioneer Moving and Storage. My brother-in-law bought it. I ran it from day one, grew with it, hired the men, had to work with them through their personal crises, with their families, with their whatever situations they had. But being an entrepreneur and captain of my own ship has been an interesting experience. The people I've met have been wonderful to work with. I'm not in the moving business. I help people for a living. And as soon as people can take that attitude onto themselves, helping people instead of making a dollar or earning a degree, pursuing whatever kind of specialty, being self-serving, as soon as you feel in your heart you are helping each and every person in whatever business you're in, that's a great milestone. And I've observed that in my children. They are the same way when they deal with whatever responsibility is given to them. And I'm very, very blessed to know them, to have them. One of the hobbies I've had, besides raising children, I used to enjoy skiing, but then I had to work on Saturdays because I needed every dollar I could get. So I kind of gave up skiing in the 80s. Oh, I skied maybe a couple of times after that. We had a cabin up Big Cottonwood Canyon, and I tried to take all the kids up there and enjoy the mountains with the children, and most of them worked hard. But we shared that cabin with another two families, and those other two families weren't always compatible, so we sold the cabin. That memory's gone, and frankly, it makes it much nicer for Margaret not to have to clean the laundry, do the towels, do all the cleanup that is necessary after people live there or party there or attack there. The cabin had as many as 600 people plus inside it during a rainstorm when the ward had a party up there. Many a father and daughter overnight or father and son overnight were held there. So there's a lot of memories when you have a thing like that. We had a few weddings up there, but none of our immediate family. We had a few wedding dinners up there. They were kind of fun. So cabins can be great, but there's nothing like going to a Marriott or a Hilton or some fine hotel and letting the maid do it all. This is a great way to be. My education I received at the University of Utah. I started out in engineering. I wasn't sure what kind of skills might be good for me to have with Vacudent and with the moving company. But I could not manage a full-time workload of 30 hours a week going to school and get the grades and the studying I had to do. So I switched from engineering over to accounting. After engineering, it was such a vast difference of ease. Accounting was so easy compared to the engineering aspects of life. So there I was in business. I did get married to Marcia Harmon. Her father was a business teacher, and that was kind of an interesting experience. In order to graduate, I had to get 2 classes out of the way. They were only taught once a year. So we devised a system. She would go to one class, take all the notes. I'd go take the tests, and I'd go to the notes in her father's class and take all the tests. That worked out pretty good. I don't know if anybody else has ever done that. When I showed up to take the test, the classes were large enough. The professors and the teacher's aides never said anything, and I always did it. I didn't cheat. Marcia didn't take the tests. But I always thought that was kind of a unique experience, how we kind of shared a class, but I had to get the test. I had to study and learn all the information, but I still got a B out of it, which was a pretty decent grade back then. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of famous people in my life. People who made records, people who were famous. You know, Burt Bacharach, met him. The singer, you got to know when to hold him, you got to know when to fold him, the guy with the beard, the country singer, but I'm not into country singing. But I met him. John Travolta. In fact, the gal who danced with him on Saturday Night Fever, I got to slow dance with about 10 years later. That was kind of an interesting experience. Billy Joel, that was fun. We met him over in Europe when he was on the honeymoon with Kate, who happened to be a year or 2 older maybe than our Katie at the time, and I shook my head. But famous people love to flaunt whatever their fame is and do their thing, but they're just people. They do their things. There are dark paths people take. There are paths that people try being a human. They try drinking. They try smoking. They try drugs. I've been blessed, other than a quick change in my life at age 7 when I gave up smoking after 1 puff. I've been blessed not to have friends or people who did those kind of things. And that's a great blessing. I've been around a lot of people. And if I was the only one there, I would always say, sorry, somebody's got to be the designated driver. I don't do alcohol. And everybody respected that. There was never a problem. But I've been blessed not to be put in a position where I had to compromise my standards. I'd like to talk a little bit about people's appearance. Many times people come across, we meet somebody, and it's like seeing a brand new car, be it a fancy car or a real expensive car, either one. They look like $1 million on the outside, but under the hood, they just are missing something. They don't run well. They need a tune-up. They need a spiritual tune-up. They're missing vital parts off the engine, so they don't go at all. Such is the case when you marry. I try to teach my children, look for deep things inside, and don't just fall for the exterior. Find out what's going on inside their lives. Do they have a testimony? Are they kind? Do they go out of their way to help other people? Are they people who like to be pampered instead of doing the pampering? My sister calls it nurtured and nurturing. Some people like to be nurtured. Other people like to be nurturing. I'm pleased to say that my children, for the most part, most of the time, have their heads and priorities on straight. But they're good. They excel in their work, and I'm very proud of that as a father. There are dating lessons that people learn when they date other people. 2 quotes that I came up with, I don't think I saw them anywhere else, but I've always claimed them as my own, is you deserve who you marry. Number 1. Number 2, you can't find out enough about somebody before you marry them. And those 2 bits of advice have served me well. Before I married Marcia, I dated her for 1.5 years. Before I married Margaret, I knew her for almost 9 months, but this was after we'd been married, both of us, to other people. This is why I say from experience, learn about people. Learn about what they do on their days off. Given a choice on Sunday, will they go to a sports event? Or will they rather make sure they pay their respects and obligations to the Lord? It's important to sacrifice yourself, your wants and your desires, the same way we do on Fast Sunday. We sacrifice. We don't do all the things that make us happy. We don't do all the things just for us. We sacrifice and do the things the Lord wants us to do. These are important things when you date. I love the fact that I was taught in my youth how to look for answers to gospel questions. If they weren't easy ones, if they weren't easily found and easily discernible in the Book of Mormon, Bible, or other standard works, I was taught to pray. I never held the Lord accountable for my father getting sick, not once. I never said, what a poor boy am I, and I'm so picked on, and nobody cares, and the church isn't true, when a good man can get sick and die. I always felt the Lord needed him for a different place, and I would sacrifice those kind of things. In Mosiah, chapter 3, verse 19, we know that we should sacrifice and act even as a child, willing to submit to all things whatsoever the Lord would have us do. To me, it means keep our testimonies, no matter what may happen. This is what it means to me. I love people, but I love more the Lord. And I told Margaret, before I married her, first of all, we will love the Lord and do what He expects of us. Secondly, we will love each other. Thirdly, we will love our families. And this advice has served us well. We pray every night. This is the advice given to Margaret and I when we got married. The advice given to Marcia and myself from President Hinckley was the same. Pray every night together. Don't go to bed with a bad feeling, any kind of bad thoughts, unresolved issues. Take them to the Lord and get His opinion. It's been my understanding when there's difficulties between people, it's a communication thing. We need to understand each other's viewpoints and respect and then pray and ask the Lord what He would have us do, and see and be patient in the Lord. But I've always been given answers to any questions I've ever taken to the Lord, and I'm grateful for that. One more reason why I feel like I'm the most blessed man I've ever known, and the blessed man living on the earth. My personality and my outlook in life is to try and say things that would put a smile on people's faces. So when I meet them, sometimes most of the world you'll hear would say, "How are you?" And people will say, "Fine, how are you?" Well, it's an echo. So I say, "Tired, old, overweight, slightly balding," and they usually laugh. That's okay. Let's laugh at each other's situation. Heck, we all look different. Every one of us. Isn't that a wonderful thing? We've all been given a different set of circumstances. I don't want anyone else's circumstances. I'm grateful for mine. I never look and think the grass is greener or somebody has it better than myself. That might give you a little idea about how I look at life. And I'll get on an elevator and I'll say things like, "I didn't know they were filming a movie here. Are you guys the actresses and actors?" Or anything that pops into my head. And I don't say that because that's the funniest thing you've ever heard. I say that because it's me. For my 40th birthday, I had a hearse. I called up the mortuary, Deseret Mortuary, and rented a hearse for the night. They didn't charge me because we'd buried a few people through them. But anyway, I had a hearse, and people would say, "What's the hearse here for?" Well, just in case I'd pass away. You can't be too close, can you? Okay, so that was a little quirky thing in my personality. My 50th birthday, I had dessert-orama. 3 days or 3 nights of dessert, all the desserts you wanted. So I had my tennis group and close friends come the first night, bring any dessert they wanted, and we all had a buffet, a potluck dessert. Feasted on that. The second night, relatives. The third night, ward members. By the third night, I was pretty sick. I think it was the prune juice that I stuck in the fridge the first night, and on the second night I thought, well, maybe I better start drinking this. It's kind of rude not to drink your birthday present. So about 1 o'clock in the morning, the following morning, after I had a nice cold glass of prune juice, oh boy, it hit my insides like a whirlwind. I was sick as a dog for the next 12 hours. I could not get away from the toilet. I am so sorry. But anyway, I share that with you. Don't drink cold prune juice. Now, I want to bear my testimony. I do believe the church is true. I do believe there's a loving Father and Heavenly Mother and all kinds of angels who are trying to put their arms around us and encourage us to do the right thing in everything we do, every minute of every day, watching over us. Say your prayers. They've blessed my life. They will bless yours. Pay your tithing. If you don't make enough money, pay your tithing. How about the other offerings to the church? Sacrifice. If you do, you will never want. You will be blessed beyond measure, beyond anything you can imagine. And I know that if we keep on pushing and have as the goal an eternal one to be together with families, people we love, that we can do that. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.